my introductory spiel for this month. I have traveled in Puerto Rico 3 times. I lived there as well. The first time I went to Puerto Rico was in June of 1995. And I went, if you ever have browsed tourist brochures, because that's what we do in 2016, Puerto Rico is always displayed in its tropical beauty, all this color. But when I went, it was June, which is after the tourist season and after the tropical season of blooming. And so the island had turned green, like just that lush tropical green that sort of on the hills folds and flows in these crevices, and it almost looks black. And there was nothing blooming, nothing at all was blooming in June of 1995, except one tree. There was one tree in Puerto Rico that blooms in the summer, and it's called the flamboyant tree. It derives its name from the same word as flamboyant. And when you drive through Puerto Rico and look up at the green hillsides, and there's a flamboyant tree just standing there, bursting into flames, it literally is one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. It just was brilliant. It looked like it was on fire. And I don't think I really appreciated the beauty of it until later in life as I aged, and I realized that part of what made that bloom so beautiful was that everything else had stopped blooming. That if it had been blooming amongst everything else, the brilliant red would have been lost amongst all that color, but it's precisely because at that moment it was the only thing, and it just makes it so beautiful. And the interesting thing about this month more than others is I work with the storytellers on our show as much as they need. And this month I've worked with a lot of them because the process of blooming late is a very, very interesting process. And I want to emphasize that it is a process. The bloom of a flower is the visible process of germination. It's the last bit of the process. And I think the stories tonight will bear this out, is that when that process takes a while, when it's delayed for some reason, that the complexity and subtlety of the bloom is somehow really, really eye-catching and powerful and subtle and brilliant. And so we've gathered together 7 stories tonight from a very different set of perspectives. And we're going to hear tales of people who started dating late in life, who started dancing late in life, started masturbating late in life. And so we're going to have sort of this range of stories of folks who sort of late in life did something different. This bloom that came late and therefore is so brilliant. So to kick us off tonight, we actually, as fate would have it, there is a comedy show, a very good comedy show, on this very stage on the 3rd Friday of each month called The Dangling Loafer. And that's one of the founders clapping. But both founders instantly were like, I would like to tell a story at the show. And so it's nice. We're going to bookend them. And one of them is going to start us off, and one of us is going to bring us home. And the first is Shane Smith, very funny local comic. And when we talked about his story, what was interesting, because I hadn't thought of this, is that we tend to think of late blooms as somebody starting something new. I'm going to do this for the first time in my life, and you're going to hear a lot of that tonight. But what Shane brought to the table was this idea that sometimes a late bloom happens because you let something go. You carry something in your life for so long, and then at some point you realize, I don't need to carry this anymore. And that provides the space upon which we bloom or change. And so here to tell the story, I'm totally blanking on the name of the story. It's the first time that's ever happened. Shane, what's the name of your story? So It Goes! So It Goes! Here to tell So It Goes. Please welcome to the stage, Shane Smith.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. So, my story begins now. I've always been the type of person that overreacts to small things. Like the smallest of things, I overreact. There's the phrase, don't cry over spilled milk, because what's the worst that can happen? Well, the worst that can happen is while I'm cleaning up the milk, ninjas could break in and murder my family. Like, that's how I think about that. So I'm always freaking out about things. To give you a little explanation, a little example of how I freak out, we should go to my middle school, where I was a young middle schooler. And I was walking through the hall one day, and a man, he's a boy, whatever, middle schoolers. We're walking through the halls, and he comes up to me and he goes, "Your girlfriend has green tits." And First, I wanted to know why he knows that, because I hadn't seen them, because we hadn't gotten there yet. And two, why were they green? Had they tarnished? Does she shop at Claire's? I need to know answers. But of course I wasn't going to ask him, and I was not going to stand for him telling me that my girlfriend had green tits. So I knew I had to do one thing. I was going to break up with her. So I wasn't going to stand for that. So I remember that I was going to break up with her, and I remember the day I did it because I was running through the hallways. And typically when I ran through the hall, I was farting. This is true. Because I thought that me running through the hall farting, people wouldn't know it was me. Because hey, I wasn't standing there talking, smelling like farts. But of course, now that I think about it, I was the only one running through the halls, smelling like farts. Hindsight, 2020. So I'm running through the halls, farting, and I see her, and I go, well, I could have stopped. And I could have stopped and said, hey, listen, I want to talk to you. I'm really hurt that you showed your naked top to somebody else. And second of all, I'm really concerned that you didn't trust me to tell me that your tits were green. And this is just how middle schoolers talk. I don't call them tits anymore. I'm an adult. I just want to let you know that. And I was just hurt that she didn't come to me with her problem. But I didn't do that. I just ran past her and I yelled, I'm breaking up with you! And I just kept running. Assuming she probably got farted on. That's pretty good. And I never talked to her again. Not once. Which is pretty sad. So that's how I deal with things. I overreact. And most people grow out of overreacting over small things, but I didn't. It took me a long time. So let's cut to high school. High school, I'm a senior in high school, and I'm clearly horrible with women, just because of that last interaction I talked about. And I was a senior, and I overreacted not only to bad things, but good things. So like if I saw a girl in the hall and she made eye contact with me, I thought, hey, we have something. That's a thing. It's not how it works. So I was really excited when a new girl moved to town who didn't know me, didn't know how weird I was, and she had transferred in from Hawaii. She was gorgeous. Tan, blue eyes, strong jaw, looked just like Kelly Kapowski from Saved by the Bell. And just remember that was relevant back then. Gorgeous. Thing was, I was a senior, she was a freshman. Now seems real weird. Real weird. But back then, when you're in one ecosystem, it seemed okay. And it was South Dakota. People marry their cousins. It's fine. So I wanted to get to know her better. So I would go to her locker every day, and she was real shy. So I would talk to her, and every day I'd go there and I'd ask her for a Jolly Rancher, because she loved those, had an endless supply. So that was how I broke the ice every time. So it is a little weird that it was a young girl giving an old guy candy. I see the difference, but that's how it worked back then. So I liked her a lot. But I didn't know how to ask her out, and her friend said she was real shy. I could tell she was shy. So I called her friend, and I was like, hey, listen, I want to get to know her better. How can I do that? She said, well, she is so shy, she can't call you on the phone. She's going to send you a letter, which seemed perfectly normal, guys. This was before cell phones. It'd be like texting now. That's normal, right? I don't know what kids do nowadays. Snapchat? That's a little dirtier, probably. I don't know. So that made sense. I was like, yeah, she's going to send me a letter. So I sat at home and waited for that letter. The letter never came, surprisingly, to me. So I called her friend, and I was like, hey, listen, I never got that letter. What's the deal? And they said, well, she actually doesn't like you. And I was like, well, she's still giving me Jolly Ranchers. What the hell? I don't understand. So I just dropped it. We're friends, and I left it at that. And then I went to college. Forgot about her. Was real bad with women in college also. First girl I hooked up with in college, while I was on top of her naked, she said, promise you'll never leave me. And I did the only thing I could think of doing, is I pretended to fall asleep. I was like, rolled over, and that was the end of that. So clearly, I don't deal with things well. So cut back to summertime, I go back home, and I see the girl I like working at the grocery store. And I notice her noticing me, and I'm making eyes, we're making eyes. I probably visited that grocery store 30 times in 1 week, just so I could awkwardly make eye contact with her. So I thought, hey, she was shy, she wanted to write me a letter, but she didn't. I'll be the gentleman, and I will write her a letter, because that makes sense. So I built up all my courage, wrote her a letter telling her, hey, I would like to get to know you better. We should go out for coffee. And I wrote 2 copies of the letter, one for myself and then a nice handwriting one. and wrapped it up. And there was nothing sexual in there. I knew nothing about girls to even have sexual innuendo in this thing. I just said, I would like to get to know you better. So I nervously lit the envelope, closed it, and put it in the mailbox. Now I waited, and I waited, and I took a sip of my beer, and I waited. And 3 days later, I got a letter in the mail, and this is what it said. Dear Shane, my daughter Christine, probably should have changed her name for this story. My daughter Christine has no interest in getting to know you better. My daughter is 16. If you like to play with little kids, I suggest you become a school teacher. That's what he wrote in the letter. First off, what the fuck? Second off, if you think I'm into kids, don't give me options. Don't tell me where I can find more of them. It's bad parenting, if you ask me. It's horrible. And then he said, my daughter and I thank you in advance for leaving her alone. And then he enclosed his military business card. So, that was horrifying. I was mortified, I felt embarrassed. That's like getting kicked in the nuts through your face and your ears. And like reading a letter, I don't know how to explain that metaphor. It hurt. That's all I'm saying. It felt bad. And that totally screwed me up. I was like, I can't talk to any girls now. Anything I could say to a girl could come back as a letter from her dad. It would ruin my whole life. So basically it set me on a sexless path through college. Like I was too scared to talk to girls. The only way I could do it is if I was drunk. And that always turned out awkward. And it was just a bad situation. I just held it in here the whole time. And it was just so embarrassing, and I just knew I couldn't talk to girls because of that. That one moment totally fucked me up for a long time. So cut to 10 years later. I'm living in Raleigh. I get a Facebook message, and it's from her. And she says, hey, I'm living in Raleigh. We should get together for coffee. I was like, oh my God, this is a date. This is a date. I'm married, but this is a date. I'm pretty sure. So we meet for coffee, and we're exchanging about her. She's telling us about her life, my life, and whatever. She says she's divorced, and I say I'm reluctantly married. And we talk, and she said, it sucks that all the good ones are taken. That's a line she actually said, and I was like, it is a date. Shit, I'm married. Okay. So we talk, and like she's continuing to talk to me, and my brain just shuts off, and she's talking, I'm not hearing the words, because I know I have to tell her about this letter. Because I, one, don't know if she told her dad to write it, or if he just wrote it on his own, and I'm like thinking, she's talking, I'm nervous, I'm like, what am I going to say, how do I tell her? I couldn't even think. And finally I'm like, hey, wait, listen, I just want you to know, I wrote you a letter in high school, saying I just wanted to get to know you better, and I liked you. And your dad wrote me a letter back, saying to leave you alone. And I expected her to come over, cradle my bald head, hug me and say, listen, I'm sorry. That's horrible. That's the worst thing that's ever happened to anybody, ever. This probably set you on a sexless path through college. It probably did, and she would have been right. And I was expecting those words to come out of her mouth. But instead, when I finished telling her that, she looked me in the eyes and she said, yeah, that sounds like my dad. That's all she had to say. Yeah, sounds like my dad. And I was like, what the fuck? That's all you have to say? It sounds like your dad? But I thought about it. I was like, oh my God, that is the exact thing I needed to hear. It's not what I wanted to hear, but it's exactly what I needed to hear, because what that told me was that this is just a moment in time to her. That's something her dad did all the time, probably, and it didn't mean anything. It's just a thing that he did. Just a moment in time. But to me, that was the moment in time that defined 10 years of my life and made me scared of everything. And that just made it okay. It was like her saying like, shit happens, whatever, fuck it. Why are you crying over spilled milk? That's exactly what that was, and it made me go, why was I holding this? I can let it go, it's not a big deal. So I've started adopting that philosophy of life. The fuck it philosophy of life. And I usually am pretty good about keeping that. Every once in a while I catch myself. So a couple years ago I was in New York City, and I was at a comedy festival, and I'm in a room at a party surrounded by tons of comedians, all really cool, all famous people, and I wanted to be cool. And I was real paranoid all of a sudden, because I was real stoned, and I realized that I was the only one in the room wearing a cat t-shirt. Had a picture of it, it was a three-wolf cat one, I don't know if you've seen it, it's awesome. So I'm wearing that, and I get real paranoid, I'm like, oh my God, I'm the only one wearing a cat t-shirt at this thing, I want to be cool, I need to go to my hotel room and change. Go to my hotel room, and I open my suitcase, I had only brought 2 other shirts. My 2 other shirts, one of them was a cat face made of human skulls. And the other one was a human skull made of cat faces. So all I had was cat shirts of this thing, and I'm freaking out, like, this is the end of my comedy career. This is horrible. Everyone's gonna make fun of me. I'm gonna be the worst at that. And I stopped and I thought about that scenario and about how the letter and how it wasn't a big deal. And I started laughing. I thought to myself, wait a minute. I'm freaking out because I brought comedy or cat shirts to a comedy show, and I'm freaking out about it. And I thought, yeah, that sounds like something I'd do. All right, that's the time, guys. Thank you.